I'm Bob Kleinschmidt, and I'm an Organization Development Specialist at Organization Development Diversity.
Well, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed, Bob. My first question is about your examples of professional communication, both good and bad. Talk a little bit about that for me, please.
Okay. I think really all communication is based on listening, good listening. So, if you're not going to listen to me, then I'm not going to talk to you. So I think that's really the key for it. And then also making sure that people understand what I'm saying. So, eye contact and sort of maybe some nonverbals are really helpful. And I think just sort of pleasantries, like treat me like a human being, and, I'm not just my 9 to 5. So, talk to me a little bit about my life. How you doing? How's today? You have any plans for the weekend? Any kind of stuff like that.
You spend a lot of time working with groups across the institution. How do you think groups get into trouble when they're communicating?
I think they jump to conclusions, so they don't really understand maybe what some people are saying. And so someone might say something, they misunderstand it, and sort of run with that story that they have in their head about what's going on, and they don't kind of check it out to say, is that really what you meant? And many times it's just those understandings that sort of get out of control sometimes.
Yeah. Have you ever had a situation in a medical environment where you felt like miscommunication occurred?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I got food poisoning around the holidays, and so I went into the hospital, and I was, sort of throwing up all night. And so when I went in, I was really kind of not feeling very good, and so I go into the emergency room, and a nurse proceeds to start sort of doing stuff with me, and I wasn't feeling good and was asking her, what are you doing? And basically she just said, just sit there and it'll be over soon. And I did not like that response. And basically I wanted to be cared for a little bit. She's a nurse. She's supposed to take care of me. It's part of her job, I think. And so actually I was so frustrated with that experience that I wrote a letter to the hospital afterwards, just because it was such an unpleasant experience. And I didn't feel good to begin with, and then to be sort of treated that way didn't seem to make it any better for me.
So what could she have done, to really strive for the best communication with you? Give me some examples of the kinds of things she could have said or done that would have made a difference.
I think just sort of talking to me a little bit of, okay, this is what I'm going to do, kind of explaining things, and, sort of just checking in. How is that? Is that okay? Even if it hurts, and sometimes those things can't be avoided, but at least sort of asking the questions, I think sometimes could be helpful, and it certainly would have been helpful there.
Yeah, so shut up, sit still, you'll feel better in a minute doesn't quite do it for you.
Yeah, no, it doesn't do it for me. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
My name's Carlotta Chappelle. I work with Organization Development and Diversity as an administrative coordinator.
Well, thank you, Carlotta, for being here today. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your examples of professional communication, both good and bad. What does that look like for you?
Well, when I speak with someone in a professional setting, I like for the conversation to be straightforward. I don't like a lot of chit-chat. I like to get right down to business, though somewhat personable, but I still like to get to the bare bones, to the meat of what the discussion is to be about. Now, the bad communication in a professional setting is one where the conversation just seems to ramble on, and it takes all these twists and turns before, if they ever finally get to the point of what we're discussing.
How about in meetings?
In meetings, I would prefer to have an agenda in a meeting, and I like to have the conversation really stick to the agenda. People don't have a lot of time. Well, I know I don't have a lot of time, and I like to, be able to actually get some meaning or get to the purpose of what the meeting is about.
And so how about in professional settings? Have you ever had a situation in a medical setting where you felt like people didn't communicate with you very well?
Oh yeah, I can remember probably the worst medical appointment I had. I went to see a doctor, and after a very brief examination and just a few questions, they proceeded to pull out one of those recording devices and started to dictate in it. And they used language that I could not understand, and I just could not believe it. Then they finished, they put the recording device away, they scribbled something on a prescription pad, handed it to me, and said, call them if the symptoms persist.
So in a medical setting, how could a doctor improve their communication with you?
Well, in a medical setting, I really prefer the doctor to be, personable, but still straightforward in the discussion of any of my medical condition. I prefer to have the doctor, ask probing questions, and after I give answers, to sort of paraphrase back to me so that I feel confident that they fully understand what I'm trying to tell them. I also like to be told what's going to take place during an examination, or why they feel I need a particular medical test, or why they're using this medical instrument on me. And I also like to know what they're putting down in my medical chart.
Oh. So to keep you fully informed.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Carlotta.
Bernard Justice. I'm an Associate General Counsel for the university, work in the General Counsel's office. I handle a lot of real estate and transactional matters.
Great. And so welcome, Bernard. And I invited you here today to talk a little bit about your examples of professional communication, both good and bad.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, as a general theme, professional communication should be effective. People should be able to communicate their thoughts such that a person on the other end can walk away knowing exactly what that person intended. And that doesn't always happen if you don't have good professional communication skills.
And give me some examples of miscommunication when you're in one-on-one conversations.
It can come in two forms, I think, at least in my experiences. One, when someone doesn't say what they actually mean. Do you like this idea? What do you think about this idea? And people tend not to want to be critical, so they'll go, that's not such a bad idea, when that's not what they really mean. Other forms are when people aren't clear. I need to give you direction. I have 4 things I want you to do, but I'm not going to tell you those 4 things clearly so that you can walk away, if you were to take notes, with 4 things. A lot of upper management may do that, and you will walk away from the meeting, what did she mean? What did she want me to do? And you may not follow it through correctly because they failed to tell you what exactly they wanted. They failed to give you direction.
Why would they fail to do that? What do you think is behind that?
I think they don't think it through, or they're just not good in communication. They'll be good in giving criticism when it's not done, but they may not be good in saying, let me sit you down. There are 4 things we need to have, let's say, in this letter. And here are the 4 points. You can modify it as you want or draft it as you'd like, but I need these 4 points to be in that letter. Now that's good communication, it's good direction. Other folks will say, we just need to respond to what they've sent us and just, put our points down and then I'll take a look at it. Now I've given you no direction, the latter person. So how can I expect you to write what I'd like to see written if I haven't given you that?
What do you think happens in meetings? Give me some examples in group communication of what makes for really good group communication, like, for example, in a meeting.
I think the person running the meeting should be receptive to differing ideas. I think people should have the courage to give a different idea or to be critical. Often the first or second person that makes their point tends to set the tone. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, I tend to agree that's a good idea. And you may have 3 other people in that room who don't like the idea, or they'll think it's a good idea, but they may not be as inclined to say that because the first 2 people were on board. Now, the facilitator of the meeting can help by saying, okay, I know that those are 2 people in favor, anybody against. Now, that's a good facilitator, but you have some folks who, if you're not agreeing with me, then I don't want to hear your point of view. So the 2 dynamics are people that are either receptive to differing points of view, and then those that lack the courage to say something that's a little bit different than what has been said thus far.
That's a great example. You gave me both the good and bad in one answer. So let me ask you about in healthcare settings. Have you ever been in a situation with medical professionals where you felt miscommunication occurred or people just didn't communicate with you well?
I haven't personally, but I've had relatives that have, and I feel at least that what they have not done is made sure that what they wanted answered was answered. Often, healthcare professionals may not listen. I need to know why my heart is hurting. They'll check everything. You look fine. Okay, great. Goodbye. Now, another person may say, well, my heart is hurting. You haven't answered the question yet. I want to find out the answer, and I'm going to make you accountable. So, and I'm not going to leave this office until you've answered that question. But you have to be forceful, and you have to be demanding. And it's not necessarily because the healthcare professional doesn't want to answer the question. They're just not thinking. And people that are not that forceful will walk away, and they won't have that question answered, and they may have some additional problems, and then they have, a bad situation.
So when you go to meet with your doctor, how do you approach that meeting?
Probably a little weird or anal, but I will write down the 2 or 3 or 4 things that I have issues with that I want to find out whether they're a problem. And we will go through them. And at the end of the meeting, I'll look down on my notes and we've answered 3. Doc, I meant to tell you about this, or we never got to this, or you never responded to me on this last piece or this last issue. And they'll find, oh, you're right. And then we'll talk about it. That way, at least I know I've walked away getting those 4 things addressed, because you don't want to go to the doctors, but so often.
Right.
And that opportunity doesn't come up often.
So if your doctor wanted to influence you, maybe to stop smoking or lose weight or change your behavior in some way that would improve your health, how would you want to be approached by that doctor if they were really going to be able to influence you to change your behavior?
First, tell me the facts. What is my physical condition today? What am I doing today in activities, smoking for instance, and how that will affect my health? Why I need to make the change? And then empower me. Give me some suggestions on how to change that behavior.
Great. Thank you so much, Bernard. That
You're welcome.
really was perfect information.
Great, thank you.
The FIT training program at Hopkins, and I am the training operations administrator.
Well, thanks for agreeing to talk to me today, Debbie. So my first question is, would you describe for me your examples of professional communication, both good and bad? What do you think of as professional communication?
I think communication is a key component to any organization, and I find within our team, when we have our team meetings and everyone's there, or they also can call in, that we find out more about what everyone's involved with. Our team are in and out of the office, our instructors are teaching, so the communication can really lack during the course of a week, and we don't know really where different projects, what the status of them are. So when we meet as a group, everybody's given the opportunity to discuss what their projects are, what the status of them are, and it keeps the whole team updated, which makes our team really successful. Emails are good. It keeps us updated with things, but I think emails also can be misread sometimes. I know myself, if I don't understand something, I'll have to email back for clarification, and then emails can go back and forth, and before you know it, you're spending a half hour, 45 minutes just trying to figure out what this particular email stated. So, yes, emails are good to a point, but it can also be time consuming. And I think the way our team also works is, what makes it work well, we all do keep everybody updated. We try to make sure that everyone is aware of everything going on in the department, our task, whether it's involved with our department or we're very involved with an H1 project right now. So to keep us stable, I think that we just really communicate well together.
And when you say stable, what do you really mean by stable?
Just that everybody's aware of where everyone's going to be. No one panicking saying, okay, well, this person isn't here today. You know, what's going on? Why aren't they here? It just makes our environment a lot easier, keeping the communication open.
We should make our viewers aware that you and the FIT team have been involved with the Hopkins One rollout, and you've been moving back and forth between Eastern and Mount Washington for the past almost 2 years now, I guess.
Yes.
And so everyone has 2 offices and lots of responsibilities to both teams, and it could get really difficult if you didn't have good communication skills in the group. So let me ask you, Debbie, has there ever been a time in a medical environment where you feel like you communicated badly or medical professionals communicated badly with you? I know your dad's been ill and you've been really providing a lot of the care that he's received lately.
Since June, we have had a good bit of bad experiences with doctors, rehab centers. My dad was diagnosed, we got the actual diagnosis on July the 2nd, and the neurologist that came in was just very cold and very to the point, basically saying, you're a dead man. He didn't say it in quite those words, but surgery was out and there's nothing we can do. And then the very next day, the oncologist came in, and she was just really great, had a really good bedside manner. She explained things to us in detail, gave us different options, and we all just felt really good with everything that she said to us compared to the neurologist that was in the day before. Since then, my father had been hospitalized 2 times for internal bleeding, and the first time he was in ICU for 4 days. The doctor tending to him in ICU told us that they were going to move him to progressive care, and he would probably be in for at least 3 more days in progressive care. So that evening, it was a Thursday evening, he was able to come home. It was about 5 o'clock, and by 4:15 Friday morning, not even 12 hours later, he was rushed back to the hospital and was bleeding internally again. But they had told us that they would be keeping him there for 3 days, but they only had him in progressive care for probably about 18 hours and sent him home. So we couldn't understand why they were sending him home when the doctor in ICU told us that he would be in at least 3 more days. Then we had the same scenario happen again when he was rushed back to the hospital because of bleeding again. He was in ICU. After 24 hours, everything was stable as far as his vitals. But in that week time, from the first bleeding to the second bleeding, they had put 12 pints of blood into him.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And they ran tests, and they really never found out where this bleeding was coming from. They did upper GI series, lower GI series, and because his vitals were stable, they moved him out of ICU, but we were told that they would keep him in the medical unit for another at least 2 days. The very next morning, after him just being put in the medical unit, we get a phone call saying that they're releasing him today. So it's just really bad communication between the ICU unit, progressive care unit, the medical unit. Here we all think, he's going to be in there a couple more days. This is good. What if the bleeding starts again? At least he'll be here if it happens. But it just seems to be really bad lack of communication between the different units at the hospital. Why we're being told one thing and the very next day it's completely different. And it's very frustrating.
If you could describe the doctor that you would think would be the perfect doctor for your dad, what would you look for in that perfect person?
Actually, his oncologist. We all pretty much feel she's perfect. After Dad's last time with the internal bleeding, because my father was so very weak, he couldn't even walk, they sent him to a rehab center. And the rehab center was just horrible. It was dirty, it was disgusting. My father inquired about where his lunch was because the other two patients sharing a room with him had had their lunch a half hour, 45 minutes prior. They actually brought my father someone else's lunch.
But you told me about that.
Yeah.
The meat had already been cut up, and
The-
it looked like someone had just
Yeah.
not finished their lunch.
And the milk was opened and partially gone. And when his oncologist found out that's where he was at, she did say to us, I wish I would have known that's where they were sending him, because I would have very much discouraged your family from sending him there. And needless to say, we signed him out and had an ambulance bring him home, and he's been home and now under hospice care ever since.
Ever
So,
since. Wow.
and hospice is wonderful. They are really good to my dad and to the family.
I'm so glad he's getting the care he deserves. Thanks so much, Debbie. We wish your dad very well in the future.
Thank you.